Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, author of Visualizing Happiness in Every Area of Your Life and host of this podcast, Incredible Life Creator. And today I have with me William Bill Strickland. Hey Bill,
Good morning. How are you, Dr. Kimberly?
I am great and I'm very excited about what we're going to talk about. But before we do, I'm going to read your short bio so people know who you are.
Okay.
So, as a transactional attorney and business executive, Bill Strickland successfully represented professional athletes for over 35 years, primarily in the National Basketball Association and the National Football League. In his capacity, he negotiated contracts for personal playing services, endorsements, appearances, events, promotions, and a broad array of other contracts which resulted in the close of $2 million in gross compensation paid to his clientele. His experience includes operating, budgeting, and management responsibilities for staff and agents across the five major league sports of baseball, basketball, football, hockey, and soccer. Bill also established and managed his own management company, which was successfully sold after 10 years of operations. He serves on the board of directors of the Polk Institute Foundation and is the organization's interim chief operating officer. So, welcome to the podcast. You have a very interesting background.
hmm it was been an interesting life. And by the way, that is two B as in boy, billion.
2 billion. Oh my
Uh,
goodness. That's a lot.
yeah. I've been fortunate and blessed in my life. I think having turned an avocation into a vocation.
So cool. So, um, what made you decide you wanted to be an attorney?
Well, that's interesting. I first will back up before that and say that I was a high school athlete where I was able to co-captain the city championship basketball team with a gentleman that ended up playing in the NBA. I was drafted by the Dodgers out of high school, but my mother didn't have an opportunity to gain an education. I think she made it to the fourth or fifth grade. So she just encouraged me to go to school. So fortunately, I was able to obtain a full athletic scholarship to Loyola Marymount University here in Los Angeles. I didn't know what I wanted to do because I suffered a knee injury my senior year, which ended my professional pursuits. So I went to work for Rockwell International Microelectronics Group, worked there a year, saw that the finance backed or finance educated executives moving up in the chain. So I went to UCLA, got an MBA and a concentration in finance, came out, still didn't know what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
And I was decided to go to Georgetown Law, and now I'm a member of two bars. To answer your question, though, I had an occasion, which is unfortunately the kinds of incidents that continue to happen. I was held at gunpoint by the LAPD, having left a party at the time with Black Panther members in there, and they must have thought I was one, and was held at gunpoint by four cruisers, a helicopter, and two unmarked police cars, a special tactical unit. And I didn't think much of it because I grew up around that kind of activity all the time in Compton,
Mm.
and I just assumed it was my time, my turn. But then my basketball coach in college was very upset. I ended up meeting a lawyer for the first time in my life that was a member of the ACLU in a class action lawsuit, and I became part of that. And in that process, I began to realize that I knew nothing about my legal rights.
Mm.
So I grew that interest. And then so I got the MBA, like I said. Then I decided to go to Georgetown Law. And because at UCLA, I learned how to evaluate capital markets. I then went to the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, and learned how to regulate capital markets. Was
Mm.
there for 4.5 years and ended up being the first African American to join the second largest sports management company in the world at the time, which was called ProServe. So that's how I got started in DC, actually some 38 years ago, representing athletes.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. And it is important to know what our rights are as citizens, especially with everything, even the last few years, so many things changing, and we need to know what our rights are, and that we can stand up for those rights. No.
Yeah, it was interesting to me because I remember talking to the captain of the special tactical unit, they called it. He's sitting there with two pearl handle pistols on his waist, turned backwards like he was Wild Bill Hickok. And I kind of laughed at it, but then I thought to myself, it's not a laughing matter, particularly if they thought I was a member of the Panther Party, which is why I got out, ordered out of my car, and I saw four shotguns aimed at me, and I've never done anything. So it was an education, but it was a necessary one, and that education has been extended because I will share with you and your viewers. I was born in Springfield, Ohio.
Mm.
And so with some recent events, it made me harken back to those days where I started law school and have been practicing law, member of two bars in good standing and so forth.
Mhm. Wow. And this might be kind of a different question, but in that situation, you were just really an innocent bystander. But
Yeah, I was at I had really I left I had a little two-seater little car and my roommate was with me and we pulled out and I looked and I saw the unmarked car following us. I said, "Why are they following us?" And then it occurred to me that there were at the party we just left, and I mean we're college students leaving a house party,
Mhm.
some members of the Black Panther, and I said they must have been under observation. They thought we were members because they ordered us out of the cars with weapons already drawn. So laid down in the whole routine. Was not issued a moving violation, a traffic citation, nothing. Just said after they searched my car and everything, they said, "Okay, go." And that was it. So,
Wow.
and that, like I said, my coach found out talking about it in the locker room the next Monday in practice. So anyway, that's how I got started. There's no compulsion. I had never met a lawyer in my life, never thought about it. And to be honest with you, I hadn't even thought about going to college because I was so sure I was going to play pro baseball
Mhm.
until I got hurt my senior year.
Yeah. You never know how life turns or changes, and yeah. And then even that next step where you were the first
African American
African
at
American
coach.
to actually be a part of that team of that company. How did that happen? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people thinking, "Wow, regardless of what color they are, how do you actually get a position like that?"
That's a very good question. In fact, I'm teaching two courses now where one of them is how to break into the sports industry. But what occurred to me in retrospect, maybe the injury was a blessing because, like I said, I worked for Rockwell International and I saw that the guys with financial backgrounds were the ones moving up in corporations because the aerospace industry at the time was under some compression in terms of industry. And then I also worked at McDonnell Douglas for a period of time. But in looking at that, I said, well, I'm seeing how these people are moving. So I did the MBA thing. Um, but that experience in working in the private sector
Mhm.
was educational. Just like I happen to have had the good fortune to teach at Wharton Business School at the graduate level. And at Wharton, you can't even apply to the school, at least it was some years ago, unless you had 2 years of private experience. So that private experience taught me that at the time when I was trying to break in with this company called ProServe, which was started with on the basis of Arthur Ashe and Stan Smith and Charlie Passerelle in tennis, um, I knew from listening to others around me, including one of the guys I played weekend basketball with was Eric Holder. People were trying to get there, but nobody of color was there. But they were all saying, they need me, they need me. And what I said was, no, you got to find a way that they need you in a different way from just saying the absence of color. So I was fortunate enough to understand that. And I graduated from law school at the age of 30 because I had to work
Mhm.
my way through. Met John Thompson, who was then the coach at Georgetown, who has since left us, and introduced myself. And I said, I'm trying to go here. Here's my credentials. And he was important to their business.
Mhm.
That made the difference. And then I was fortunate enough in the lobby of the SEC one day, an attorney named Edward Bennett Williams came walking through. Williams and Conley in DC, a major law firm. Um, and he had an associate, or actually a partner named Larry Lucchino, who became president of the Boston Red Sox and a bunch of other teams. I grabbed him by the arm, and I've told students in the past, I said, this gentleman is walking through, getting ready to get in his limo, and here's this little young black guy grabbing him by the arm. But I bet on myself and grabbed him by the arm, and I said, excuse me, Mr. Bennett, who at your firm handles your sports business? At the time, he was owner of the Baltimore Orioles.
Mhm.
He introduced me to Larry Lucchino, who in turn called the company I was targeting, saying, I got somebody in my office I think you guys need to talk to. So I had two ambassadors before they even had a resume. So
Mhm.
that's how I did it. And then I shored up my credibility with Edward Bennett Williams in that I'm in the Oriole clubhouse with Eddie Murray, who is in the Hall of Fame.
Mhm.
Eddie used to be our bat boy. I played with one of his older brothers. And so there was a convolvulence of happenstance and people I met. And that's how I broke in at ProServe, because if you got John Thompson who's sending players to ProServe, and you've got Larry Lucchino and Edward Bennett Williams owning the Orioles and calling on my behalf before they even had my resume, they had to look at me.
Mhm.
And I think that made the difference. Networking.
Yeah, yeah, it really does, doesn't it?
Yes.
So the other thing I wanted to ask you about is, you're negotiating these big deals basically. And when I think about that, my family, there's a lot of teachers and, principals and stuff. And when you're the principal or the teacher, you're like trying to make the parents happy, you're trying to get the principal happy. So in your case, you have some hotshot young guys who think they need a lot of money, and then you have the clubs who have to, how do you negotiate in that situation to keep everybody happy?
Well, first of all, I had to learn to keep myself guided and happy and have character. As you can imagine, being one of the first, I was the first African American agent to represent the number one pick overall in the NBA draft twice. That was Purvis Ellison and Chris Webber.
Mm.
uh, and working with the caliber of players like Michael Jordan. I worked with Michael his first 8 years in the league. I worked with the recently, last week, departed Dikembe Mutombo, who is a fabulous man. Uh, but I had to learn to keep my character in center and do things in the dark that I know I was doing the right thing. And that's one of the things we try to impart at the Institute now, the Polk Institute. And so I was confident that I was trying to go about it the right way. It took me 2 years,
Mhm.
despite my degrees, despite my bar status and the whole bit. It took me 2 years of lobbying to finally break in. But I knew if I was true to myself. So when it came to dealing with the athletes, it was a matter of trying to educate them about their potential pitfalls and the fact that all money is not good money. Having money doesn't always mean that you are have maintaining character. And being a public figure is so easy to trip and fall,
Mhm.
because especially in these days, everybody's looking at you. And so you try to maintain some truth about your life and direction about your life. Doesn't always work, but I was fortunate to represent some individuals who are good people.
Mhm.
And I think that helped me reinforce my notion of this is the kind of direction. You deal with some of the owners, you deal with some of the general managers, some of the presidents, and they may push back because you're a so-called agent. But I was also quick to say, not only am I an agent, but I'm also an attorney, and I have ethics to comply with. So I think that helped me as well.
That makes sense. When it comes to like integrity, what are some of the most important characteristics you think a person could have?
That's a good question with a broad answer. One of the things we say at the Polk Institute is, what do you do when you're by yourself and nobody's looking and you've got a decision to make?
Mhm,
One of the things we try to emphasize at the Institute is what we call the triple bottom line.
mhm,
And, a lot of times in business, past success has always been a matter of how much money do you make? How much money do you make? How much money do you make? And there's a certain value placed on your net worth. But we try to say to our cohorts in the programs is understand that, your success is not measured in just terms of dollars, but you have a triple bottom line. That triple bottom line is profit. I'm sorry, people, planet, and profit. People, planet, and profit. It's otherwise known and referred to as time as social entrepreneurship. And so you try to look at what is your impact in terms of your employees,
mhm,
in terms of your communities, and in terms of the environment, and have character, be coachable, be willing to understand your mistakes and stand up as you go forward. One of the things in that respect, and I tell the cohorts a lot of times when I have a chance to address them personally, I said, I believe in a Chinese proverb that goes along with having character and developing yourself into be a fundable, that is in money, fundable CEO. And that is, behold the turtle, for it only makes progress with what? Its neck stuck out.
mhm,
Remember that. That's part of being in business. Sometimes you have to stick your neck out, but you don't just cavalierly do it. You do it with some guidance, some wisdom, some sense of direction, and knowing that you have to move ahead. So that's one of the things I think we try to stress in terms of being of character, being coachable, being understanding that you will have mentors that you can form along the way, which we try to provide, and examples.
So, just so people who may not know what the Polk Institute Foundation is, can you give us a short summary?
Short, I'll try. Started by a gentleman named Gary Polk, who happened to go to the undergraduate school I went to just 8 years later, so I won't deal with the age gap. But Gary was a professor at Cal State Dominguez Hills, and in doing that, he discovered back in '91 or thereabout that he had a love for teaching. And he comes from a banking background and insurance background. And in the process, over the years, he found himself running a couple business incubators in certain local cities here. And then when he got to Cal State Dominguez Hills, he ended up running their incubator for a while. And in the discovery of his passion to share thoughts and insights and his readings with students, he started running the incubator there at Cal State Dominguez. But you have certain limits as to independence and public restraint, public financing restraints. So he started his own foundation about 4 or 5 years ago. And since that time, he's built a program that spans two different 10-month sessions, once a week in the evenings for about 2 hours, tuition free. And the program involves what we call the incubators, that are people getting started, and then the accelerator for people who may have been in business for 2 or 3 years who have some concept. Some of our incubator cohorts have no idea anything about cash flow, balance sheets, burn rates, uh, filing taxes sometime.
Mhm.
Whereas the accelerators understand that. So, just a quick list of kind of topics that we cover in time is like ethical leadership, character when nobody is looking, fundable, becoming a fundable CEO. That is fundable in the sense of someone who may be willing to support you and or invest in your concept or business. The triple bottom line: people, planet, and profit.
Mhm.
Mental fitness, and that goes to my idea about the turtle. Personal finance, entrepreneurial finance, both beginning and advanced. The
Mhm.
proof of concept, operations, human resources, legal basics, basic legal basics, intellectual property. Then you have a banker's workshop, go-to-market fundraising, and then you have a showcase where you have an opportunity to stand up on the stage and make a pitch. And that's kind of what leads us into the women's pitch competition we're about to have. And he focused on what was a noticeable thing he says when he started his incubator activities, the absence of black and brown and women businesses. We have since expanded the focus on black and brown and women businesses to include veterans. So it is not to the exclusion of anyone else, but we find those particular segments oftentimes lack the access to capital, the knowledge, the experience. And when you're dealing with young people, they have other pressures on them. And then when you deal with women in particular, you have issues that we could talk about in a while that are kind of pressure, which is why we're trying to have a women's pitch competition. And I think it's the third or fourth one.
Mhm.
But we also, in the backdrop of those topics, and this is all tuition free, and it's just workshops. We have legacy members that people that have been in business for 10 or more years and at least $500,000 in gross sales. And then we have members who are act as mentors from the legacy group or other proven businesses to help mentor some of the young people coming through the program.
That is wonderful because with all the changes we've had in the last few years, where people came home to work and then decided, hey, I could do something, I could create this. Even though there was a lot of negative that happened with that, the
Mhm.
positive that happened is that people realized that sometimes they weren't happy where they were, and they had their own ideas that they would like to bring to life, which would enhance the world with their new company, business, service.
Self-determination drives a lot of these entrepreneurs and being able uh, to set forth their own path, even though they may stumble.
Mhm.
And that's part of what we say too. You're expected to have some setbacks and failures. We had a gentleman that stood up at one of our pitch competitions earlier this year, and he had people laughing, but what he said was true. He said, I'm an overnight success. It took me 20 years to get here. And there's a lot of truth in that. And I know when I started my company, and I was a little bit blessed again because I had been operating with this other company for around 14 years. So I knew budgets back and forth. I understood cash flows, burn rates, balance sheets, all of that kind of stuff. So I was able to fairly assess and evaluate what I needed to get started and the potential pitfalls and things I wanted to avoid. But I was driven by self-determination and wanting to control my own destiny.
Mhm.
I had a young man, a nephew of mine, about 3 weeks ago, said to me, and he just graduated in construction management stuff, and he's in charge of building two mansions right now in Georgia.
Mhm.
And he said, Unc, I made a determination, and this is pursuant to me asking, what are you going to do with this man? He said, I learned I don't want to have somebody over my shoulder second guessing what I have learned, what I've studied, and what I know I can do. So I think I'm going to start my own construction company in a couple of years.
Mhm.
And then his girlfriend, potential fiance, is an interior designer.
Oh,
I said, "Oh, you
perfect.
really got a plan."
That is perfect.
Exactly. But that kind of thing is what Gary wrote about in a book he entitled "Why Women Entrepreneurs Fail to Win." And I'll just share with you a couple points he makes. And this is why next Tuesday, I think the 16th, is when we having this women's pitch competition.
Mhm.
Um, and it says that it addresses the challenges that often are unique to women or work against women. Access to capital due to biases,
Mhm.
You oftentimes have men who are in lead banking situations, in lending and venture capital and angel financing situations, and there is a bias against women that we have to acknowledge. And then when you add ethnicity to it, it makes it particularly difficult.
Mhm.
Uh, you've got the situation where a lot of times um, women are more, perhaps more pragmatic in their thinking as they're approaching entering the marketplace and trying to be an entrepreneur. And I think that's because I happen to believe women are brighter than men and understand and are more thorough in their thinking. And I see the head going up and down. So you agree. But part of that means, how do you perceive yourself? How do you allow yourself to dream? How do you allow yourself to pursue something? And then, and so part of it is learning to dream your dream and dream it with some confidence. With an appreciation, you got to stick your neck out and you're going to have obstacles. Nobody in business, nobody is gone without any difficulties. We don't live our lives without difficulties.
Mhm.
So it's how you deal with them. And then, we have to recognize, unfortunately, that women have other pressures on them, even as they try to become entrepreneurs, in terms of being mothers,
Mhm.
trying to take care of maybe ailing parents, and for that matter, just being a wife,
Mhm.
if or in a relationship, and the pressures that that may bring to your business pursuit. So those are some of the kind of things that Gary speaks about that we have encountered. And that's one of the reasons why we decided to have an all women's pitch event. We had, I think, in excess of a dozen applicants to be part of the pitch event and the questionnaires. We've narrowed it down to five with one alternative. It's going to be all women judges, as it has in the past. And we have a guest speaker, and I need to look up her name, Vivian Shimiyama, who's the keynote speaker. She's the founder and president of Breakthrough Unlimited, and helped create the iconic glass pen to symbolize breaking the glass ceiling, forming the foundation of her advocacy for women in business. We've had interesting some past speakers. I know last year we had a young lady who heads up a bank, and part of their mission statement is social entrepreneurship. Very effective. And she said, some of my colleagues at my bank may not agree with what I'm about to tell you, but I'm gonna be honest with you. And sometimes it's tough.
Mhm.
So we're looking forward to it. We're going to have it at the El Segundo Women's Club out here near the airport, and
Mhm.
it should be a very nice event.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll have this information in the show notes too for people to, see about it. So is this something where if someone's actually not doing a pitch, would they be able to see it?
Yeah, it'll be recorded, but what we've been doing, and I was doing that for 3 hours last night, is a number of us, including two past winners, have been coaching and having the women go through their pitch, their pitch, 5-minute pitches,
Mhm.
and then you'd have the coaches making observations and making suggestions and everything. And the underlying thing we try to emphasize is that there is no one here that is a loser. It's all about education, tips, how to hone your presentation skills. Because when you go before a potential investor, Dr. Kimberley, as you probably know, it can be intimidating and tough. But
Mhm.
how do you stand, make your presentation? And in this forum, they stand on a stage, it's being filmed, it's an auditorium, you speak to the back of the stage, and we coach them as to little things. Like last night, we had a young lady who was very articulate, really knew how to present within that 5 minutes, but she was doing like this
Mhm.
because she was nervous. Don't rock unless you're going to rock to the other side of the stage and walk in a dress and walk over here in a dress, and
Mhm.
just little things like that. And then sometimes we have to get into content, And we have provided them with an outline of the kinds of things that the judges will be looking for in terms of your leadership team. What do you need the money for? What's your hook?
Mhm.
What what's going to grab the people at the outset? What is your intended use of the ask that you have? It's very similar to the Shark Tank, just not as sharp as the Shark Tank.
Sounds like fun. And, what a wonderful service you have with that foundation to help people because in my eyes, the more people show up as who they are, their most successful selves, not only do they feel happy, that fulfillment, that joy that is the way our life is supposed to be, but they add to everyone else's life when they share their service, their business, their talent with everyone.
One of the things that we've noticed, and particularly among the coaches and advisories, is that it's almost like in a classroom, sometimes when you're teaching students, and you could almost see the light bulb go on.
Mhm.
Some, yeah, they don't engage, but some they say, "Oh yeah," and I didn't think of it that way, and it's fulfilling for me because carrying over from the classroom, and I've been fortunate enough to teach at every level of college, from undergrad at George Washington in DC to the grad school at Wharton to law school at USC to even the executive extension programs at UCLA. And you
Mhm.
see the lights go on, and it's gratifying to say, okay, I'm reaching. You're not going to reach everybody.
Mhm.
And quietly, some are taking it in and may not hit them until they go back and do some of their own homework. But that's gratifying, and particularly when you can provide some guidance and encouragement to people. I gave an address last year at our showcase, and I talked about how you never know who's watching. You have to be receptive to how you're conducting yourself because someone may be watching who may want to support you, be it by words, example, or money. And if you're acting crazy, they're going to shy away. But I
Mhm.
shared with them the realm of influence. When my youngest daughter was about 4 years old, I had a gentleman come to my house and have dinner. He's a pro ball player. He had his what I call body art tattoos, and he
Mhm.
fell asleep. And
Mhm.
so he's laying on the couch downstairs asleep, and she walks up to him. She had never seen a tattoo in her life. And she wanted to touch him, and she was looking, looking, looking. Do you know, about 2 weeks later, I'm helping her clean up her little room, and all of a sudden, one of her baby dolls had black marks on their arm
Uh-huh.
from markers. And I told the people, I said, see, my client was asleep,
Uh-huh.
but was being observed and influenced my daughter.
Uh-huh.
Go and mark up one of her baby dolls. You just don't know. So you've got to remain cognizant of how you conduct yourself and that what your aim is. And no, none of us are perfect. But I think that understanding helps give you confidence. So when you have the ladies standing up on the stage and they're making the presentation, and it's interesting too, I've shared with them something else that occurred in law school with me where we had what is called a moot court, where you get up there and you make arguments. And we had three living, real appellate judges sitting up there, two males and a woman. One young lady got up to present her arguments. Her blouse was a little sheer, maybe one button too low. It was interesting that after they gave an analysis of the arguments presented, the female judge said to the young lady, I would have you leave my courtroom if you came before me in real life dressed like you are. And she had a suit on, but it was just that blouse. And she said, understand you have to dress appropriately and not take away from what you're trying to present. And
Mm.
I've shared that with some of the cohorts. And so when the women's club said no stiletto heels and heels allowed in the facility for whatever their rules are, we said be cognizant of that and carry it further. Your body language, how do you present, just your overall presentation. And We've had a couple that came in a little flamboyant, but the day of the pitch competition, the slits were gone.
Uh-huh.
And of course you have guys that come in there uncollared and stuff like that. I said, is this the way you want to be perceived in your business? You're not quite Elon Musk yet,
Mhm.
but understand. And so those little subtle things sometimes and how you present, I think can make a difference in how someone gains confidence or are reassured and saying, okay, I understand that.
Yeah. Beautiful.
We've even, I share another story real quick is we had a young lady that came in with a popcorn business. And it was something that they flavored and developed in their family. And she said, it's been in my family for 9 or 10 years, and I decided to try to convert it to a business. Well, she took some of the flavors to her school where she was a teacher. And the kids liked it so much, they start saying, hey, this is cracking. So when she came in with cracking popcorn,
Mhm.
one of our judges said, do you really want to call your product that? Because you think about where the community from which you're coming with that product, crack.
Mhm.
He said, yeah, they thought it was so good. It was like it's addictive. I said, yeah, but do you want to say that to the marketplace when
Mhm.
you have a very legitimate premium product that some people may get lost on because of what you call it?
Mhm.
Uh, and she maintained the name anyway, but at least she had reason to pause and think.
Mhm.
And I think that was educational.
Yeah, definitely. So, if people wanted to find out about the Polk Institute, how to get the education, where do they go?
They can go to our website, pokefoundation.com, and actually he calls it pokeinstitutefoundation.com, and be able to pull it up on Google, and it will direct it from there. But the actual, and I'm trying to look for it, the actual telephone number is 323-657-7655. 323-657-7655, and you'll be able to discern it right there. And I think it's a good group. We've got several people on a volunteer basis who are professionals in their own right. And you know Devin
Mhm.
in the PR area. And so we're trying to expand the breach. It's not a big institute. It's not several millions. It's a smaller one now. We're trying to do fundraising. In fact, on November 16th, we have a gala casino night that's occurring in Long Beach, where for $100 you can get in and get $300 worth of chips. And of course, as a nonprofit, we're not passing out money. You just might get a prize or participate in the silent auction and the public auction.
Mhm. All right. Wonderful. So now I have a personal question for you.
Sure.
What gives you the most happiness and fulfillment in your life at this point?
Being alive. I know that's somewhat flippant, but I'm in a season of my life, and I had a former math teacher who became vice chancellor at UCLA, and he had me read 2 or 3 books right before he passed, and one was Seasons of a Man. Um, I've been surrounded in greater frequency now with death, and I know that's an inevitability of life. And I've tried to say to myself, well, live your best true life as long as you're here.
Mhm.
Uh, I live in a neighborhood where I've seen 5 white sheets in the street, 3 in one van that was hit broadside, T-boned and over. And I walked down there and saw the white sheets. Last week, people heard of Dikembe Mutombo dying. Dikembe was a client. I remember when he first went to Georgetown, he wanted to get into the medical arena. John Thompson, rightfully so, said, no, son, you're going to play pro basketball and you can use that money to do what you want to do in medicine. That's why Dikembe went back to the Congo and built a 175-bed hospital.
Mm.
He was like I said, a very glorious man. And I've seen Michael Jordan grow from leaving his house the first winter in Chicago, turned all his water off. His dad had to go back in there after all the pipes burst because of frozen water in the pipeline. He didn't know. That's the first time he ever owned a home. But
Mhm.
seeing the growth of these young men, and that gave me some gratification. So for me, when I look at the blessings I've had, I came from South Central Los Angeles, Watts. And yeah, I was born in Springfield, Ohio. I moved out here when I was 12. I've been able to travel the world a bit, including Hong Kong and mainland China and Tokyo and the Philippines, I don't know, to Europe. And I look back on that and I said that I've been blessed, even though I wasn't able to play pro baseball, which was my singular focus at one time. So today, it's a matter of sharing my experiences, my education a bit with some of the younger people coming along. I find gratification in seeing the light bulbs go on. I
Mm.
find gratification in knowing that tried to be a positive influence. I have three children, all of whom have done well and so far have stayed out of trouble. Uh, my youngest, I'm hoping she decides to get married sometime soon. I've got a couple kids through my son, but that's the one. She lives in New York and is about a year away from being a partner at PwC. So I feel gratification when I think about them and the lives I've been able to share with them and the wisdom that they share with me
Mhm.
out of the mouth of babes.
Mhm.
I was transitioning out of representing athletes on a daily basis about 5 or 6 years ago. So I remember having lunch with my daughter she went to Penn and she said, Dad, now you're going to leave representing athletes? I said, yeah, I think I've had my fill. She said, well, what are you going to do? I said, I really don't know. She said, well, you could do any number of things. Just pick one or two and do it. I said, are you working for Nike now? Just do it. So that's what brings me some joy is in the classroom, working with the cohorts, young people, and not that you know everything, but and so you have occasions where you can learn, but just being able to share some experiences and say, provide some guidance because I didn't have any. My mother tried, like I said, my father was gone. My mother was fourth or fifth grade education. My grandfather, third grade education. My grandmother turned into a bit of an entrepreneur, but she had no formal education. So that's why education was stressed in the household.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today and for
Mhm.
all your wisdom and stories.
Yeah, well, I tried, I tried to get to the comedic stage, but I'm not Jay Leno, so I just leave that alone. But I really appreciate you allowing me to speak with you and your audience.
Thank you. So I have one last question before we complete. What is your best advice on living an incredible, amazing life?
Hmm. I've been told by a therapist friend of mine that I kind of bang through life. I had to learn when to accept advice, how to accept advice, and when to ignore advice. People have opinions. And just to illustrate that, I remember being in a rowboat race when I was at the YMCA at a camp. Sold candy to get there. I was all excited just to be at the camp. So they put me in a rowboat. Never been in a rowboat in my life. I was in a race, no less. But I said, okay, let's go. I think I know how to row. Someone from the shore was telling me to use, I think it was my left oar more. I said, I know how to do this. I kept on going. Well, I went straight into the bank, last place. And right as the race ended, I started using the left and it straightened the boat out and I went toward the finish line. That taught me that was good advice being given.
Mhm.
But like I said, I was co-captain of a city championship basketball, high school city championship team here. I was told I was too small and little to play varsity at that high school. I ignored that and I went ahead. I ended up being my first year in the 10th grade, the junior varsity most valuable player, and being on the end roster, sitting on the bench though, but still with the varsity team in the city playoffs.
Mhm.
And so that juxtaposition of when to accept advice, when not to, is something I've struggled with, but I've been blessed that as I blasted through life, I learned to be maybe half full, but I'm definitely somebody who I think is perseveres and sustain tries to develop sustainability. So if anything I could part on is allow yourself to make mistakes, and when you do, grant yourself some grace, but keep pushing ahead because we need good people in this country and in this world. And I think everybody can see it given November 5 and what's coming. I think it's a very critical time for our country, irrespective of what aisle you sit on side of.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
We'll talk to you again soon.
Okay, you take care and have fun.